Your husband abandoned you. But don't worry, in my bed you'll find love every night, the Count said. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Isabella Moretti woke before the bells of Santa Lucia rang, startled by a silence that felt wrong. Her small house near the edge of the village was never this still at dawn. Marco always moved about early, his boots tapping lightly across the kitchen floor, his low humming drifting beneath the door. This morning, nothing. Only cold air and the faint creak of wood, shifting in the night's leftover chill. She sat up, pressing a hand to her chest as though she could calm her heartbeat with her palm alone. "Marco," she called, hoping he had stepped outside to check the chickens or fetch water. No answer came. She rose, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and pushed open the door to the kitchen. The room was empty. The hearth had long gone out. His coat was not hanging on the hook. The cup he used each morning sat untouched on the table. Something inside her tightened. She walked to the stable with hurried steps, half scolding herself for worrying. "He must have had an early errand," she murmured. "A delivery, perhaps." But the stable boy, Gianni, stood there rubbing sleep from his eyes with a troubled expression. When he saw her, he lowered his gaze. "Did Marco take the mare?" she asked, her voice too thin to hide her apprehension. "Yes, Signora Moretti," Gianni muttered. "Before sunrise. He didn't say where he was going." She blinked. "Before sunrise? Without waking me?" The words felt wrong in her mouth. Marco had never left without a word in the entire 5 years of their marriage. Gianni hesitated. "He carried his traveling bag, Signora." The world shifted beneath her feet, just barely, but enough that she had to hold the stable door for support. She thanked the boy and walked back toward the house, keeping her steps steady, though her breath had grown unsteady. She tried to place reason over fear, order over confusion. Maybe he left on urgent business. Maybe he meant to return soon. Maybe... Then she reached their bedroom again and saw the truth she had overlooked in her first rush of panic. The drawer where Marco kept his money was open and completely empty. Isabella pressed a hand over her mouth. For a moment, she could not breathe. By mid-morning, the village had already begun to talk. Word spread as quickly as the rising heat of the day. She stepped outside to buy bread, thinking she could distract herself with errands. But the baker's wife, Signora del Pane, greeted her with a tone dripping with too sweet sympathy. "Oh, Isabella, dear," she said. "Have you heard the news? Everyone says Marco ran off. Men can be so unpredictable." "He has not run off," Isabella answered quietly. "He left early for business." Signora del Pane raised a brow. "With his traveling bag." 2 older men near the fountain shook their heads. "A shame," one murmured. "A young wife left alone like that. Poor thing." Isabella felt heat rise in her face. She tried to remain composed, picking up the bread she came for, but every whispered remark cut deeper. On the narrow street, 2 young women carrying baskets tried to hide their smiles when they passed her. One whispered to the other, "Do you think he left because of her?" They both laughed softly. Isabella lowered her gaze and kept walking. By noon, she felt trapped inside a story she had not written. Everywhere she turned, someone looked at her with pity, judgment, or curiosity. Shame pressed on her like a physical weight. She wanted to demand that the world be silent. She wanted to tell them Marco was not the kind of man who would abandon his wife, but the empty drawer and the stable boy's uneasy face said otherwise. When she reached the center of the village, she stopped by the well, gripping its stone rim. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. If Marco truly left her, then she had nowhere to go, nothing to rely on. She had never imagined beginning her day as a wife and ending it as something she did not yet know how to name. As she stood there gathering her breath, she heard hooves clattering over the cobblestones. A large carriage turned into the square, bearing a familiar crest, a silver hawk with outstretched wings. The Bardi family. The villagers fell silent. The carriage came to a stop, and before the driver could descend, the door opened from within. A tall man stepped out with a controlled elegance that made several nearby women lower their eyes. Count Lorenzo Bardi was known throughout the region, admired, envied, and whispered about. His confidence was a language unto itself. He surveyed the square briefly. Then his gaze landed on Isabella. He walked toward her with purpose, the villagers parting like water around him. Isabella stiffened. utterly unprepared for his approach. She had only spoken to him a handful of times, and always with the formality expected between a nobleman and a villager. "Signora Moretti," he said, stopping before her. "Count Bardi," she answered, conscious of every eye in the square watching them. His voice dropped lower, carrying a note she had not heard from him before. "I heard what happened this morning." Her breath caught. "Then the entire country must know," she said softly. At that, something flashed in his eyes, irritation but not at her. He glanced around at the villagers who were pretending not to stare. With a controlled breath, he turned back to her. "You do not deserve their whispers," he said. She looked away. "Whispers cannot be controlled." "They can," he replied calmly, "if someone speaks louder." She blinked, confused. "I beg your pardon?" Lorenzo turned to face the crowd gathered at the edges of the square. He lifted his chin. The murmuring ceased. His words rang clear through the open air. "Your husband abandoned you," he declared, "but do not worry, in my bed you would find love every night." The square gasped. A bird took off from a rooftop in startled flight. Isabella stared at him as though he had struck her. Her voice caught in her throat before she found it again. "How dare you say such a thing?" she whispered, mortified. "Count Bardi, this is not—" He leaned in slightly, his tone calm and low. "I said it because they needed to stop shaming you." "This will only bring more shame." Lorenzo shook his head once. "No, it will bring silence. No villager here will dare mock a woman a nobleman chooses to defend." She felt anger boiling up beneath her humiliation. "I do not want your defense, and I certainly did not ask to be spoken of as—" She stopped herself, unable to finish the sentence. His eyes softened just enough for her to notice. "I know you didn't ask, but you were standing here alone with every mouth in this place shaping unkind words about you. I could not remain still." Isabella took a step back. "You had no right." "Perhaps," he replied, "but someone had to do something." The villagers were still staring, some with shock, some with interest, some with envy, but none with cruelty anymore. The humiliation had shifted. Now they feared the Count's reaction more than they delighted in gossip. Isabella's voice trembled. "What will people think of me now?" "That you are a woman under my protection," he said simply, "and no one dares mock what I protect." "That is not protection," she whispered. "That is a new humiliation." Lorenzo's stare deepened. "You misunderstand. I do not say things lightly in public. I said what I did because I have a reason." She swallowed, shaken and confused. "And what reason is that?" He paused, just long enough for her heart to beat once, twice, too loudly. Then he lowered his voice so only she could hear. "One I am not ready to share in the middle of a public square." She stared at him, stunned, unsure whether to step away or demand answers. At that exact moment, the bells of Santa Lucia rang, echoing sharply through the air. And before Isabella could utter another word, Lorenzo added quietly, "But you will know." Soon, Isabella felt her breath catch again, the entire world narrowing to the space between them. The villagers waited, holding their breath as though expecting more. But Lorenzo said nothing else. He simply met Isabella's eyes, steady and unflinching. The silence between them deepened until Isabella felt her heart tremble. Then she whispered the only question she could form. "Why me?" Lorenzo's expression changed. Not enough for the crowd to see, but enough for her to feel. Something softened. Something unguarded slipped through the mask he always wore. "And," he replied, "because I saw something in you long before today." Isabella froze, unable to move, unable to speak, unable even to think beyond the weight of those words. The square remained utterly silent, and then, just as the moment tightened to its breaking point, the Count took a slow breath, stepped closer, and said the sentence that shattered what little composure she still possessed. "There is something you deserve to know, and I can no longer keep it to myself." The moment Lorenzo spoke those words, Isabella felt the ground shift again. It was too much for a single day. Marco's disappearance, the whispers, the humiliation, the Count's reckless declaration, and now a mysterious confession left hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Her voice faltered as she tried to respond. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Before he could answer, the village elder, Signor Rinaldi, cleared his throat loudly. "Count Bardi, with all due respect, This is a respectable square. Such talk is highly improper. Lorenzo did not even glance at him. Improper is the way this village treats an innocent woman, he replied calmly. Improper is abandoning a wife without a word. A few nearby villagers lowered their heads. Others looked away, suddenly uncomfortable with their own behavior. Isabella felt every muscle in her body tighten. She could feel the attention pressing against her from all directions. Her shame burned so fiercely that she wished the earth would open beneath her feet. She stepped away from Lorenzo, her voice strained. "Count, please," she whispered. "I cannot bear any more stares." He heard the tremor in her tone. His expression shifted at once, without arrogance, without provocation, only concern. "Very well," he murmured. "Allow me to escort you home. I do not wish to create more spectacle." "Everything is already a spectacle," he replied quietly. "At least let me walk beside you." She hesitated, but the murmurs around them continued to rise. So she nodded once, barely visible. Lorenzo offered his arm, but she did not take it. She walked slightly ahead, trying to appear unaffected. The villagers parted again, watching as she crossed the square. Some bowed to Lorenzo, some whispered behind their hands, but no one dared call out, no one dared mock. When they reached her door, she turned to him quickly, hoping to end the conversation before anyone else noticed. "You must not speak like that again," she said firmly. "I know you meant to defend me, but your words were too much." Lorenzo met her gaze evenly. "What part troubled you most?" "All of it," she admitted. "Especially what you suggested about your bed." A faint smile touched his lips, not mocking, simply amused. "It was effective, was it not? No one will dare insult you now. It was humiliating. It stopped a greater humiliation." "No," she insisted, her voice shaking. "It only replaced one shame with another." His smile faded. "You truly believe I meant to shame you?" "How could you not?" she asked. He answered without hesitation. "Because I do not speak lightly when it comes to you." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. She looked away, flustered. "You barely know me. You think I do not notice you whenever you come to Florence to buy fabric. You think I have not watched you greet every person with gentle patience. You think I have not seen the quiet way you endure things you should never have had to endure." Her breath caught. She had never imagined that the Count, the aloof, admired, unpredictable Count, had ever seen her at all. "I meant no harm," he added quietly. "But I refuse to stand still when a woman is being torn apart by gossip." She hesitated, torn between indignation and an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Still," she said, "it was unnecessary. Then allow me to make amends." "How?" "By telling you the reason I spoke as I did." She stiffened. "I do not wish to hear another scandalous remark, Count." "This one will not be scandalous," he said, "only honest." Before she could answer, footsteps approached. Signora Del Pane turned the corner, staring at them with such wide-eyed curiosity that Isabella felt her entire body tense with dread. She whispered sharply to Lorenzo, "Not here, please." He nodded. "Then tomorrow, at your door. No crowds, no audience." She wanted to refuse, but she also wanted to understand what had driven him to defend her so boldly. So she simply nodded. When he left, she slipped into her house and shut the door, leaning against it. Her heart raced. Her mind felt too full, tangled with questions, fears, and something else she dared not name. The afternoon passed in a haze. She tried to bake bread, but her hands shook. She tried to sew, but her stitches came out uneven. Each time she attempted to calm herself, her mind returned to that moment in the square, to his voice cutting through the whispers, to his gaze fixed on her, to his confession that he had seen something in her long before today. By sunset, she could not stand the quiet of the house. She stepped outside, hoping the cool air would clear her thoughts. But the moment she entered the square again, conversations halted. A group of women nearby pretended to examine vegetables while stealing glances at her. One leaned toward another and whispered, "Imagine, the Count himself." Another replied, "Perhaps he's finally chosen someone." A third murmured, "She must have known how to attract him." Isabella stiffened. Her cheeks burned. She walked faster, attempting to ignore them, but Signora Del Pan stepped directly into her path. "Isabella," she said with a tight smile, You should know that boldness from a man like the Count is dangerous. Men of his stature do not make promises to village women. Isabella swallowed hard. He made no promise. He made a declaration, Delpain corrected her, and in front of all of us. There are consequences to words like that, especially for someone like you. Someone like me? Isabella repeated, her voice tense. A woman whose husband has just run away, Delpain said with a sympathetic tilt of her head. It is unfair, but people talk. Isabella lifted her chin. People talked even before he said a word. Yes, Delpain agreed, but now they talk differently. Then let them, Isabella said, surprising even herself. Delpain looked startled. I only meant to help. By reminding me of my misfortune, Delpain blinked, unsure what to say. Before she could reply, a firm voice sounded from behind them. Isabella. She turned quickly. Standing just a few paces away, Teresina, her elderly neighbor, waved her over. Isabella excused herself and hurried toward her, grateful for the escape. Teresina gave Delpain a disapproving glance before pulling Isabella aside. Do not listen to that woman, Teresina said. She feeds on gossip, like birds feed on crumbs. Isabella let out a shaky breath. Everyone is watching me. Of course they are. First your husband vanishes, then the Count speaks as if he were born to cause trouble. People love a story. It is not a story, Isabella murmured. It is to them, Teresina responded gently. But not all stories end the way the village expects. Isabella tried to smile, but her heart felt too heavy. You must rest, Teresina said. Tomorrow will bring clarity. I doubt it. Clarity always comes, Teresina said with a knowing nod. Sometimes in the form of a question, sometimes in the form of a man. Isabella stiffened. I have no interest. Yes, Teresina interrupted softly. You do, or you would not look so shaken. Isabella parted her lips to argue but found no words. That night she tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Marco's absence haunted her at first, the empty drawer, the cold space beside her in bed. But slowly, another image replaced him. Lorenzo standing in the square, unafraid to speak, unafraid to face the village for her sake. His eyes when he said he had noticed her before. His promise that he would tell her the truth. She pressed a hand to her forehead. It was madness. Everything was madness. Morning came too quickly. She barely had time to braid her hair before she heard a firm knock at her door. She froze. A second knock followed, slower, deliberate. She opened the door with a breath she did not know she had been holding. Lorenzo Bardi stood there, dressed plainly rather than in noble attire, as though to soften his presence. His eyes met hers without hesitation. Good morning, he said. She nodded. You came. I said I would. She stepped aside. Then say whatever it is you wish to tell me. He walked past her, then turned to face her as the door closed softly behind them. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet inside her home felt heavier than the quiet of the square. More intimate, more dangerous. He drew a breath. I spoke in the square yesterday because I could not bear to watch them diminish you, he said. I have seen you hold your dignity through things most people could not endure. And when I heard Marco had gone, I knew exactly how they would treat you. Isabella swallowed. But why speak so boldly? Because the village needed to be silenced, he said, and because He paused, searching for the right words. Because I have felt something for you for longer than you realize. Her heart skipped. Count Lorenzo, he corrected gently. Please, she struggled for breath. Lorenzo, you cannot say such things to me. I can, he said, because they are true. She took another step back, her pulse racing. You speak as if you know my heart. I do not presume to, he replied. I only know my own. She stared at him, unable to form a single coherent thought. Then, unexpectedly, he added, and now that the village is quiet, something else must be said. Her breath trembled. What else? There is something about Marco's disappearance that reached me, he said slowly. Something beyond gossip. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? What reached you? He met her gaze steadily, the weight of his words gathering between them. A rumor, he said, that Marco did not vanish for the reasons people believe, but for reasons far more troubling. Isabella felt her breath catch. sharp and immediate, at the word troubling. It pressed into the room like a cold wind. For a moment she could only stare at Lorenzo, unable to decide whether she wanted to know more or run from the conversation altogether. "What do you mean, troubling?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Lorenzo did not move closer, as though giving her space was his first instinct. "I mean that Marco may not have left simply out of weakness or fear. There are whispers he was involved in dealings he should never have touched." Her brow furrowed. "Dealings, Marco? No, that cannot be. He was careful, timid even." "I know how he appeared," Lorenzo said, "but people are rarely what they seem, especially when they believe their secret's safe." Isabella sank slowly onto a wooden chair, her hands tightening around the edges. "What kind of dealings?" "I do not know yet," he admitted. "Only that a messenger passing through Florence claimed Marco met with men of questionable character, men who rarely enter honest business." She covered her mouth with her fingertips, her pulse hammered in her ears. "I knew nothing of this." "I believe you," he said simply. She looked up sharply. "Do you?" "I would not be here otherwise." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Of all the people in the village, Lorenzo was the only one who had not questioned her innocence. Not once. The silence grew heavier. She rose quickly, needing movement. She opened a window to let in the morning breeze, but the fresh air did little to calm her trembling. "Why would Marco hide such a thing from me?" she asked softly. "People who are afraid of being judged often hide the truth from those they value most," Lorenzo said. "Perhaps he wanted to protect you from consequences he could not resolve." She shook her head. "No, he would have spoken to me. We shared everything." Lorenzo gave her a long, unreadable look. "Are you certain of that?" The question struck her deeper than she expected. She remembered the late nights when Marco returned home tense and silent, the excuses about errands, the way he avoided her eyes when she asked simple questions. She had written it off as exhaustion, stress, normal burdens of life. But now, under the weight of Lorenzo's words, doubt crept in like a shadow. "I do not know what to believe anymore," she whispered. Lorenzo stepped closer, but not too close. "Then let the truth speak for itself. It always finds a way." She closed her eyes briefly. "And what if the truth is worse than anything I imagine? Then you will not face it alone." Her eyes opened. He held her gaze with steady certainty, and for a moment she felt something like refuge. A knock suddenly rapped on her door. Isabella jumped. Lorenzo instinctively moved slightly in front of her, though without aggression, just instinctive protection. She touched his arm lightly. "It is all right," she murmured. A young girl from the village, Anna, stood outside holding a small basket. Her eyes widened when she saw Lorenzo, but she quickly bowed. "Signora Moretti," she said, "my mother asked me to bring you fresh eggs." "That is kind of her," Isabella replied, though she knew exactly why the gesture had been made. Sympathy from villagers often came wrapped in gossip. "Tell her thank you." Anna nodded, but before she left, curiosity overcame her. "Is it true the Count said something very shocking in the square yesterday?" Isabella felt heat rise to her cheeks. Lorenzo folded his arms, amused. "Anna," Isabella said gently, "rumors tend to grow with each telling. So he did say something." Anna whispered eagerly. Lorenzo answered before Isabella could stop him. "I said what was needed." Anna gasped softly, thrilled by the mystery, then ran off, nearly tripping over her own feet. Isabella groaned softly as she shut the door. "More fuel for their gossip." "Yes," Lorenzo said, "but now it is gossip driven by curiosity, not cruelty. That is progress." She gave him a weary look. "You speak as if you enjoy provoking the village." "Not enjoy," he corrected, "merely accept it as necessary from time to time." Their eyes met again, and despite everything, her confusion, her fear, her humiliation, she felt a reluctant smile tug at the corner of her mouth. He noticed and allowed himself a faint smile in return, but the weight of their earlier conversation quickly returned. "What am I to do now?" she asked. "First, breathe," he said, "then listen." He walked toward the small table and rested his hands on the back of a chair. "The rumor will continue to grow, and more will come. When people sense a mystery, they chase it. You must be prepared for that. I do not know how. You will, because you are stronger than you believe." She looked away. You give me too much credit. I give you only what you deserve. A knock interrupted them again, louder this time. Isabella stiffened. It was Teresina. The elderly woman stepped in without waiting to be invited, then stopped abruptly when she saw Lorenzo. "Ah, I should have known," she muttered. Isabella blushed. "Teresina, please." "I have lived long enough to recognize when a man is hovering around a woman with purpose," Teresina said bluntly. Lorenzo coughed lightly to hide a chuckle. Teresina set a folded piece of paper on the table. "This came to my doorstep last night, addressed to Isabella. No signature. I did not open it." Isabella stared. "To you? Not to me? Whoever sent it did not want anyone to see them walking to your house," Teresina said. "I thought it best to bring it first thing." Isabella's hands trembled as she picked up the letter. The seal was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar. Lorenzo watched her closely. "Shall I stay?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." She opened the letter slowly, breathing through the tightness in her chest. Only a single sentence filled the page. "You deserve the truth about your husband." Her breath hitched. She read the line again and again, but it offered no further explanation. Lorenzo reached for the letter with a silent question in his eyes. She handed it to him wordlessly. He scanned it once, his brow tightening. "The sender knows something," he said, "and they are cautious. Cautious people do not write letters without a reason." Teresina crossed her arms. "Someone in this village knows more than they are saying." Isabella looked up sharply. "Who?" Teresina shook her head. "That is for you and the Count to find out." Lorenzo paced once across the small kitchen. "Who delivered this during the night? Who walks at such an hour? Who fears being seen? These are the questions we must ask." Isabella lowered herself into a chair. "I do not want more mystery. I want clarity." "You will have it," Lorenzo said, "but first you must not allow fear to silence you." Teresina touched Isabella's shoulder gently. "Child, you have endured worse than whispers. You will endure this too." Isabella drew a slow breath. But before she could reply, Lorenzo spoke again. "One more thing," he said. "Whoever sent this letter believes Marco did something worth hiding." She tightened her hands in her lap. "I fear what that might mean." Lorenzo considered her for a moment. "Then we face that fear together." Her eyes met his. Something in her chest loosened slightly. He glanced again at the letter. "There will be more," he predicted. "Secret messages never come alone." And he was right. That evening, long after Lorenzo had left and Teresina had returned home, Isabella sat by the hearth with the letter in her hands. Shadows flickered across the walls as she tried to stitch together the fragments of the day. But her thoughts were interrupted when she heard something outside. A soft crunch of gravel, a faint rustle, her breath stilled. Then, a quick, light sound near her door. Isabella rose, heart pounding, and pulled the door open. No one stood outside. But on the ground, slipped under the doorframe, lay another folded letter. Isabella stared at the second letter lying on the threshold, the paper catching a thin line of moonlight. Her pulse throbbed in her neck. She knelt slowly, afraid the slightest movement might draw attention from whoever had left it. But the street was silent. No footsteps, no shadows, only the faint hum of night insects and the distant sound of water running through the village canal. Her hand trembled as she reached for the letter. She shut the door quickly, leaning against it for a breath before lighting a small lantern on the table. The flame flickered unevenly, as if it too sensed her fear. She unfolded the letter. "Your husband left to avoid what was coming for him. Someone knows the truth. Be careful whom you trust." Her stomach twisted. There was no name, no further explanation, just the warning. Isabella sank into a chair, staring at the words as though they might rearrange themselves into clarity. "What was coming for him?" she whispered. Her heart ached with confusion. Marco had always seemed steady, cautious, predictable. How could he have been tangled in something dangerous enough to drive him from home? Before she allowed panic to consume her, she thought of Lorenzo. He had stood beside her when the whole village stared. He had spoken boldly, even recklessly, but never cruelly. He had been the only one who didn't question her worth. If she could trust anyone, it was him. Morning could not come fast enough. At dawn, Isabella walked through the village toward the market, clutching the folded letter in her shawl. The air was cold enough to tighten her breath, and every doorway she passed made her wonder if unseen eyes watched her movements. Her steps quickened. She had barely reached the edge of the square when Lorenzo appeared around the corner, as though he had been waiting. He froze the moment he saw her face. "You look frightened," he said quietly. "What happened?" She swallowed hard. Another letter came during the night. His jaw tensed. "May I see it?" She handed it to him without a word. Lorenzo unfolded it, his eyes narrowing as he read. After a moment he looked up. "This person is hiding something important," he said, "and they fear being discovered. Fear enough to deliver it in the dark," Isabella murmured. Lorenzo nodded slowly. "Yes. Whoever wrote this wants to help you without revealing themselves. That means the truth touches them too." A few villagers nearby pretended to examine tomatoes, but Isabella felt their stares. She lowered her voice. "We cannot talk here." "Then come with me," he said gently. "Just a short walk, no gossip to worry about." She hesitated, then nodded. He offered his arm again. This time she placed her hand lightly upon it, more for steadiness than propriety. They walked toward the path leading away from the square, following a narrow road that wound behind the Bardi estate. Lorenzo led her through a wooden gate into a secluded garden she had never seen before. A quiet space, tucked behind tall hedges, shielded from the eyes of the village. She looked around in surprise. "I did not know this place existed. It is rarely used," he said. "My father preferred formal courtyards. I prefer peace." The garden was simple. Gravel paths, a few benches, rows of rosemary and sage, and a large stone fountain that had long since stopped running. The silence here felt gentler than the silence of her home. Lorenzo motioned for her to sit on a stone bench. "Tell me everything that has happened since last night." She did, sparing nothing. The sound outside her door, the anonymous letter, the warning. Lorenzo listened with his full attention, leaning forward slightly, his hands clasped. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. "This confirms it." "Confirms what?" "That Marco was tied to something he wished to keep hidden, and someone else knows what it was." She looked at her hands. "How did I not see any of it?" "Because he didn't want you to," Lorenzo said gently. "People hide things for many reasons. Shame, fear, pride." Isabella closed her eyes briefly. "I trusted him." "That says more about your goodness than his choices." She opened her eyes again, surprised by the warmth his words brought. Lorenzo shifted slightly. "There is something you should know, something I did not say yesterday because I feared overwhelming you." Her breath stilled. "What is it?" "Marco was seen in Florence 3 weeks ago," Lorenzo said, "in a tavern near the river. He met with 2 men no one trusts, men who have been known to deceive even the cautious." "How do you know this?" Lorenzo hesitated. "A friend I keep in Florence watches the movements of certain people. He mentioned Marco's name once, assuming I already knew. I dismissed it then. But now," she pressed a hand to her forehead, "why would Marco meet such men? What could he have wanted?" "We will find out," Lorenzo said, "but you must prepare for the possibility that Marco's disappearance was not about you. He fled something he caused." A strange mix of relief and sorrow washed through her. "So he did not leave because I failed him." "No," Lorenzo said firmly. "You did nothing wrong." Her breath trembled. "Yet the whole village thinks otherwise." "They will think what I allow them to think," he said simply. "And as long as I stand beside you, they will not dare breathe a word." She looked at him, startled by the certainty in his voice. "You speak as if this burden is yours too." He held her gaze for a long moment. "Perhaps it is." Her heartbeat quickened. A soft wind rustled through the hedges, breaking the moment. Isabella looked down at the letter again. "Someone warns me to be careful whom I trust," she said. "Perhaps I should be more cautious with you as well." Lorenzo's expression shifted, as if the words cut deeper than she intended. But instead of defending himself, he spoke quietly. "You are right," he said. "You should be careful with everyone, including me." His honesty startled her. "But," he continued, "I will prove to you that my intentions are true, not through grand words, but through actions." She felt warmth bloom in her chest, despite herself. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Why involve yourself in something that has nothing to do with you?" He hesitated before answering. "It does have to do with me," he said softly, "more than you realize." Her breath caught. "Lorenzo." He shook his head gently. Not yet. One truth at a time. And today the truth we must face is about Marco. She nodded slowly. Then what should we do next? We wait, Lorenzo said. Whoever sent these letters will send another. They want the truth revealed. They are guiding us. She frowned. Guiding us to what? To the heart of Marco's secret. She shivered slightly, unsure whether from cold or fear. Lorenzo noticed and pulled off his coat, placing it around her shoulders without asking. She tried to object. I don't need... It is not for comfort, he said. It is for the appearance of things when you walk back through the village. Let them see I look after you. She stared at him, overwhelmed by too many emotions at once. Gratitude, confusion, a quiet pull she didn't yet understand. Lorenzo stood. I will walk you home. They left the garden, moving through the shadows cast by the tall hedges. The morning sun had begun to warm the path, and the village noise grew louder as they neared the square. Isabella felt the weight of every stair, but with Lorenzo beside her, no one dared approach. When they reached her house, he paused. If anything else happens, anything at all, you must send word. Do not face it alone. She nodded, tightening the coat around her shoulders. I won't. Lorenzo stepped back. Good, because I intend to uncover the truth with you. She opened her door, but before stepping inside, she looked at him one last time. His eyes held something she couldn't decipher, something strong, steady, and unspoken. She closed the door behind her, her heart pounding. Hours passed, but she could not concentrate on anything. Her thoughts raced between fear of Marco's secrets and an unexplainable pull toward Lorenzo's presence. She sat by the window watching the street, waiting without admitting she was waiting. Then, just as the sun dipped behind the hills, a sharp knock broke the silence. Her heart seized. She opened the door and found a messenger standing there, breathless, holding a sealed envelope. For Signora Moretti, he said. Isabella stared at the seal. It was Marco's handwriting. Isabella stared at Marco's handwriting, as if the ink itself might vanish if she blinked. Her fingers trembled. She took the envelope from the messenger, who bowed and hurried off, as though eager to escape whatever storm might follow. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a breath she desperately needed. The house felt impossibly quiet. She walked to the table and sat, placing the envelope before her as though it were a living thing waiting to be awakened. She whispered to herself, What have you done, Marco? With a sharp inhale, she broke the seal. Her eyes scanned quickly. My dear Isabella, by the time you read this, I will be far from our home. I ask forgiveness for the pain I have caused you. I did not leave because of you. I left because I could not bear the shame of what may soon be revealed. There are matters I cannot explain in writing. Too many eyes watch me. Too many hands may intercept this letter. I beg you, do not search for me. Do not trust anyone who asks about me. And do not believe that my disappearance is what it seems. Forgive me. Marco. The final lines blurred as tears filled her eyes, not out of longing, but out of frustration, confusion, and the ache of being left in darkness again. The knock at the door startled her so violently, she nearly dropped the letter. She dried her eyes with her sleeve and opened the door halfway. Lorenzo stood there, breathing slightly fast, as though he had rushed. A messenger passed me on the road. I feared he was coming here. He was, Isabella whispered. May I come in? He asked. She stepped aside wordlessly. Once inside, Lorenzo noticed the open letter on the table and waited for her to speak. She held it out to him with a shaky hand. Read it. Tell me what it means. He took it carefully and read in silence. His jaw clenched slightly at certain lines. When he finished, he lowered the paper. This is not a farewell, he said. It's a confession of fear. Fear of what? Isabella cried softly. What could Marco have done that made him run? Why warn me not to trust anyone? Why? Her voice cracked. She turned away, covering her face. Lorenzo moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she felt steadier. Isabella, listen to me, he said gently. This letter proves that Marco's disappearance was not driven by shame of you. He left because he made a mistake he feared he could not repair. She lowered her hands, breathing unevenly. Why couldn't he trust me with the truth? Because he did not trust himself, Lorenzo answered quietly. Men who feel they've failed often hide behind silence. Isabella's shoulders sagged. He says not to trust anyone who asks about him. Does that mean someone is searching for him? Possibly, Lorenzo replied, or he feared they would. But what could he have done? She whispered desperately. Marco was not wealthy. He was not reckless. He was ordinary. Lorenzo's gaze softened. Sometimes ordinary men make desperate choices. She turned fully toward him. Did you know anything more? Did your friend in Florence tell you more? No, he said honestly. Only that he saw Marco with those men. Nothing beyond that. She looked away, gripping the back of a chair. I feel as though everything I believed about my life is slipping away. Lorenzo stepped closer, still keeping a respectful distance. You are not slipping. You are facing truth, and you are not facing it alone. His voice steadied her. She took a slow breath. What do I do now? She asked. Lorenzo thought for a moment. For now, we wait. Whoever sent the anonymous letters wants you to know something. This, he nodded to the letter, will force them to act. You think more letters will come? She asked. Yes, he said. And soon. She sat heavily on a chair. I cannot bear more secrets. You will bear them, Lorenzo said softly. You already have. She looked up at him with a mixture of fear and gratitude. Lorenzo, why are you doing this, truly? He held her gaze. Because I refuse to watch you suffer alone. Because you deserve honesty after being denied it for so long. And because... He halted. She leaned forward slightly, waiting. Because what? She pressed. He shook his head gently. Not now. Before she could question him further, there was a knock on the door. Another one. Isabella stiffened with fear. Lorenzo turned immediately, placing himself between her and the door. Stay behind me, he said quietly. She obeyed. He opened the door slowly. Teresina stood there, clutching her shawl around her thin shoulders. Isabella, are you well? I saw the messenger earlier and feared the worst. Isabella stepped forward. Yes, I received a letter. From Marco. Teresina's brows rose. Then the truth is unraveling faster than I expected. Lorenzo glanced at her. Teresina, do you know something we do not? I know people, she replied. And I know when fear drives someone out of a village. She sat down without waiting for invitation. Isabella handed her the letter. Teresina read it slowly, then nodded. Your husband made a mistake, she said, and he ran from it. But he cared for you in his own flawed way. I wish he had trusted me, Isabella said softly. Men fear disappointing those they love, Teresina replied. It does not excuse them. It simply explains them. Lorenzo crossed his arms. We must prepare for what comes next. What comes next? Isabella asked. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed outside. All three turned. A moment later, little Anna appeared at the open doorway, breathless. Signora Moretti, she gasped. I was told to bring this to you at once. She held out a small folded note. Lorenzo took it gently. Who gave this to you? A man, Anna said. But he wore a hood. I couldn't see his face. He said it was important. Isabella's heart pounded. Give it to me. Lorenzo hesitated, then handed it over. She unfolded it. 3 words stared back at her. He is not alone. Her breath caught. What does this mean? Lorenzo snatched the note, studying it. This confirms what I feared. Marco is not acting independently. Someone else is involved. Someone who knows his secrets. Someone dangerous, Isabella whispered. Possibly, Lorenzo said. Teresina stood, her eyes sharp with worry. Whoever sent that wants you prepared. Isabella felt her knees weaken. Prepared for what? Lorenzo stepped closer, his voice low and steady. For the truth that is coming. And the truth is never gentle. She stared at the letters again, dread building inside her. But before she could speak, another sound came. Soft at first, then louder. Hoofbeats approaching. Fast. Lorenzo went rigid. Teresina stepped backward. Isabella's breath froze. A horse stopped abruptly outside her door. And a firm, unfamiliar voice called out, I bring news of Marco Moretti. Isabella's heart leapt into her throat at the sound of the stranger's voice. The knock that followed was not timid. It was the sharp, urgent kind that demanded attention. Lorenzo moved at once toward the door, every line of his body alert. Teresina stepped aside, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Isabella tried to steady her breath. "Lorenzo, who could it be?" "We will find out," he replied. "Stay behind me." He opened the door only halfway, keeping his hand firmly on the edge as though ready to close it again if needed. A man stood outside, his cloak dusty from travel. He was neither old nor young, neither threatening nor gentle, just a man who seemed weighed down by long roads and heavy secrets. He removed his hat respectfully when he saw Isabella. "Signora Moretti?" he asked. Lorenzo answered before she could. "State your name and business." "My name is Vittorio." The man bowed his head. "I bring word from Florence, word about the whereabouts of Marco Moretti." Isabella stepped forward, clutching the doorframe. "Where is he? Is he hurt? Is he ill?" Vittorio hesitated, glancing briefly at Lorenzo. "Before I answer, I must know, are you alone in this matter?" "She is not," Lorenzo said firmly. Vittorio seemed unsurprised. "Then I will speak to both of you." "Come inside," Isabella said, her voice tight with urgency. "Please." He stepped in, respectfully wiping his boots on the mat. Teresina returned to her seat, eyes fixed on him. The room felt suddenly smaller, filled with breathless expectation. Vittorio remained standing. "Your husband is near Florence," he said. "He has taken refuge in a place few dare approach." "Refuge?" Isabella whispered. "From what?" The messenger sighed. "From consequences he cannot face." Lorenzo folded his arms. "Be direct." "The monastery beyond the river," Vittorio said. "The one known for taking in men who seek to disappear for a time." Isabella frowned. "A monastery? Marco is hiding among monks?" "Yes. He believes they will shield him." Vittorio hesitated. "But even sanctuary cannot hide him forever." Isabella's pulse pounded. "Why is he hiding? What did he do?" Vittorio looked between Isabella and Lorenzo, measuring the moment. "Your husband was involved in a business agreement with 2 men in Florence, men with little patience and even less honesty," Lorenzo muttered under his breath. "As I suspected." "They promised him easy profit," Vittorio continued. "He agreed to help deliver forged documents, papers that would grant them access to property they had no claim to." Isabella staggered backward. "Forged documents? Marco? No, he would never." "He did," Vittorio said gently. "But he regretted it at once. He tried to undo his involvement, but by then it was too late." Isabella pressed a hand to her mouth, stunned. Teresina murmured a quiet prayer. Lorenzo spoke sternly. "Has the law discovered this?" "No," Vittorio said. "But the men he helped, they fear he will expose them, and men who fear exposure often act rashly." Isabella's fear swelled. "Is Marco in danger?" "In danger of himself more than anyone else," Vittorio answered. "He believes he has ruined everything. He believes he has ruined you." Isabella sank into a chair, staring at the floor. "He should have told me." "He thought silence would protect you," Vittorio said. "He feared the shame more than anything." Lorenzo stepped closer to him. "Why tell us this now? You risk angering dangerous men." "I owe Marco a debt," Vittorio replied. "He once helped my brother when no one else would. I will not watch him destroy himself without trying to help." Isabella looked up sharply. "Destroy himself? What do you mean?" The man hesitated again. "Marco believes he has no future, no way to restore his honor. That is why he begged you not to look for him. He believes he can fade away unnoticed." Isabella's voice broke. "But he is still my husband." Lorenzo turned to her gently. "He is a man who fled, a man who made choices without you, choices that betrayed your trust." She closed her eyes, torn between compassion and anger, between grief and revelation. Vittorio continued softly, "There is more." Isabella opened her eyes, exhausted. "What else?" "Marco did not act alone," Vittorio said. "He was influenced by someone he trusted, someone who convinced him the scheme was harmless." "Who?" Isabella whispered. "A merchant," Vittorio said. "One who lives in Florence, a man named Rinaldo. Marco admired him. He misled your husband with false promises." Lorenzo muttered, "Rinaldo, that snake." "You know him?" Isabella asked. I've heard enough of his dealings, Lorenzo replied. He preys on men desperate for quick solutions. Isabella felt her heart ache again, not from betrayal but from the realization that Marco had been fragile in ways she had never seen. She looked at Vittorio. Why tell me all this? What do you want from me? He shook his head. Nothing. Only for you to know the truth before rumors twist it beyond recognition. Lorenzo stepped forward. What must be done now? You must let Marco stay hidden a little longer, Vittorio said. If he comes out too soon, he may face the men who dragged him into this mess. Isabella frowned deeply. But I need to speak to him. I need to hear from him. I need closure. Vittorio's expression softened. You will. In time. A heavy silence fell over the room. At last, Lorenzo spoke again. Is there anything else you know? The messenger hesitated, and this time the pause carried weight. There is one more detail, he said quietly. One I did not wish to share unless absolutely necessary. Isabella gripped the edge of the table. Tell me. Vittorio met her eyes with a gentle firmness. In the days before he fled, Marco spoke of you constantly. She blinked, taken aback. Of me? He feared losing you, Vittorio said. He feared disappointing you more than he feared losing his reputation. He spoke your name with regret every time. Isabella's throat tightened painfully. Then why did he not come to me? Because he believed, Vittorio said, that the truth would cause you pain. It has, she whispered. Yes, Vittorio said, but not the way he imagined. Isabella lowered her head, feeling tears gather. I do not know what to feel anymore. Lorenzo stepped closer, his voice quiet but steady. Feel only what is true to your heart. Nothing more. She wiped her eyes shakily, nodding once. Vittorio placed his hat back on his head. I must return to Florence before nightfall. I will bring more news when I can. Thank you, Isabella whispered. The messenger bowed and left the house. The moment he disappeared from view, Isabella slumped back into her chair, overwhelmed. Lorenzo moved to her side, lowering his voice. You are stronger than this storm, he said. Do not let Marco's choices define your future. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with confusion. I do not know what my future is. Then let us discover it together, he whispered. Isabella's breath caught, but she said nothing. They stood there in heavy silence, the unspoken truth between them growing stronger with every heartbeat. Then another knock sounded at the door, so soft, Isabella barely heard it. Lorenzo opened it cautiously. Anna stood there again, breathless, her eyes wide with urgency. Count Bardi, she gasped. A new rumor is spreading through the square, one about you and Isabella. Anna stood at the doorway, breathless and visibly rattled. Her small hands clutched the sides of her apron, as if afraid her news might blow away before she could say it. Lorenzo stepped forward at once, his voice calm but edged with tension. What rumor? He asked. Anna swallowed hard. They're saying you've taken Signora Moretti under your personal protection, that she is... She hesitated, glancing at Isabella with embarrassment. That she is no longer a woman abandoned, but a woman chosen. Isabella felt heat flood her cheeks. Chosen? She whispered. Anna nodded quickly. The baker's wife said it, and then others repeated it. And now everyone is talking about how you looked at her in the square, Count Bardi. They say it was not outrage, but something else. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. The village will always twist what it does not understand. Teresina huffed from her chair. People see what they want to see. And nothing stirs those tongues faster than the idea of a nobleman paying attention to a woman they thought would fall apart. Isabella pressed a hand to her stomach, feeling the familiar weight of shame return. But softer now, as if it were being crowded by something else she did not dare name. Anna, she said gently, thank you for telling us. You may go home now. Anna nodded eagerly and ran off, leaving the three of them inside the small kitchen, silence settling around them like dust. Isabella turned slowly toward Lorenzo. What have you done? His expression softened, though he did not look away. I have done nothing but tell the truth when necessary. The rest is in their imaginations. But their imaginations are wild, Isabella said, and cruel. Lorenzo stepped closer, lowering his voice. Let them talk. Their words cannot harm you. They can, she insisted. They already have. He held her gaze. Do you believe their words more than mine? Her breath faltered. I don't know what to believe anymore. Teresina rose from her chair and pulled on her shawl. The two of you should speak without my old ears listening. I'll visit later, Isabella. Before Isabella could protest, Teresina slipped out the door, closing it behind her with a decisive click. The room felt instantly smaller. Lorenzo took a slow breath. Isabella, sit. Please. She hesitated, but her legs felt too weak to keep her standing, so she obeyed. Lorenzo sat across from her, his posture controlled, his eyes steady but troubled. The rumor, he said quietly, is not entirely without reason. Her heart lurched. What are you saying? I should have spoken sooner, he said, but the day you learned Marco was gone. It was not the right moment. Spoken about what? Isabella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked directly into her eyes then, deep, unwavering, unguarded. About what I feel for you. Her fingers curled around the wooden seat. Lorenzo, you asked why I defended you, he continued. Why I stood in the square and silenced them all. Why I have come to your door each day since Marco left. Why every rumor about you cuts deeper than any insult thrown at me. Isabella tried to speak, but no words came. It is because, Lorenzo said gently, you matter to me more than I intended, more than I allowed myself to admit. Her lips parted, but she still found no voice. He leaned forward, though he did not touch her. This village may create lies and stories. Let them. What I feel is not a story. Lorenzo, she whispered, you must stop. Tell me why. Because I am still married, Isabella said, her voice shaking. Because Marco's absence has left my life in pieces. Because I am not ready for anything else. He nodded slowly, not offended, not impatient, just thoughtful. I know. And I do not ask you to make a choice now. I only ask for honesty. She swallowed, a tremor in her throat. Honesty? Yes, look at me, Isabella. Tell me that you feel nothing when I am near. She froze. Silence swelled between them, thick and undeniable. Lorenzo exhaled softly. You cannot say it. That is enough. She looked down at her hands, tears budding at the corners of her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the unbearable pressure of the truth he had spoken aloud. I am confused, she said weakly. Everything in my life is falling apart. I cannot make sense of anything. You do not need to, he said. Not today, not tomorrow, but allow me the chance to show you who I am. Allow me the chance to stand beside you without shame. She shook her head. You already stand beside me. Not the way I wish to, he replied quietly. Her breath trembled. He continued, softer still. I know you are wounded. I know trust feels heavy right now. But I ask for nothing more than your permission to remain close. Nothing more than that. Before she could answer, another knock interrupted them. This one light, hesitant, as though someone feared intruding. Isabella wiped her eyes and stood. Who is it now? She opened the door slowly. A young man stood there, thin and dusty from travel. He looked around cautiously before tugging at his cap. Signora Moretti? He asked. Yes, Isabella replied. I was told to find you, he said. I bring news from the monastery. Isabella felt her pulse jump. About Marco? Yes, Signora. The young man stepped into the doorway. The monk sent word. He wishes to speak with you. Isabella's breath caught. He wants to see me. The messenger nodded. He said he owes you the truth, and that only you can decide what should come after. Lorenzo stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Where is he now? At the monastery still, the young man replied. But not for long. He says he cannot hide much longer. He is preparing to leave. Leave? Isabella repeated, confused. Leave for where? The young man hesitated. He did not tell me, only that he must speak to you before he departs. Isabella felt dizzy. When does he want me to come? Tomorrow at dawn, the messenger said, at the outer courtyard. She drew a shaky breath. I see, thank you. The young man bowed and hurried away. Isabella closed the door slowly, the weight of the message settling over her like an unexpected winter. Lorenzo did not speak at first. When he finally did, his voice was steady but heavy. You will go to him. I must, she said. Yes, he replied. You must. His calmness unnerved her more than anger would have. Lorenzo, he met her gaze. You deserve answers, and he owes you every one of them. But you, this is not about me, he said gently. It is about you, and the truth you need. She swallowed. What if the truth hurts? Then let it hurt, he said. You are strong enough to bear it. She nodded slowly. Lorenzo took a step closer, closing the distance between them. But remember something, Isabella. Whatever he tells you tomorrow, whatever burden he tries to place on your shoulders, it does not define who you are now. She exhaled shakily. I don't know who I am now. You are a woman rising, he whispered, and that frightens everyone who underestimated you. Her heart pounded painfully. Lorenzo looked at her for a long time, long enough for every unspoken word to deepen between them. Then he said softly but firmly, when you return from the monastery, you will not go back to your old life. Something will change. I can feel it. Isabella didn't argue. She couldn't, because she felt it too. The air thickened around them, the silence turning warm and tense. Then Lorenzo added almost in a whisper, and when that change comes, I will be waiting. Isabella's breath trembled, but before she could speak, before she could decide what truth her heart wanted to give him, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the moment. Someone ran up to her door, panting. It was Anna again, her face pale with urgency. Isabella, she cried, breathless, someone left another message at the well, one meant for you, and people are already reading it aloud. Anna's voice trembled as she stood in the doorway, breathless from running. Isabella felt her stomach drop. Another message, another rumor, another blow she was not prepared for. Lorenzo stepped forward at once. Where is it, Anna? At the well, she said quickly. A boy found it tied to the bucket rope. When he pulled it up, people were already gathering. They're reading it aloud. Isabella pressed a hand to her chest. What does it say? Anna shook her head. I do not know. I didn't get close enough. But everyone seemed... She swallowed. Everyone seemed shocked. Lorenzo didn't wait for more. We're going. Now. He moved toward the door, but Isabella reached out and caught his sleeve. No, they already talk too much. If we arrive together, it will only worsen the rumors. He looked at her, torn. Then let me go alone. No, she said quickly. They will think you came to claim the message as your own. Teresina, who had returned unnoticed and stood quietly near the corner of the room, spoke up. The girl is right. If the Count goes, the village will think it involves him. Lorenzo frowned. Then what do you suggest? Teresina looked at Isabella. She must go, but not alone. Isabella swallowed hard. Then you come with me, Teresina. Teresina nodded. I will. Lorenzo hesitated, clearly unhappy, but stepped back. I will follow at a distance. They need not know I am there. Isabella didn't argue. She didn't have the strength to. Her entire body felt tight with apprehension. They stepped out into the village, with Lorenzo trailing far enough behind to avoid immediate notice. Teresina walked firmly beside Isabella, her stride steady, her shoulders straight. As they approached the square, the crowd around the well grew thicker. Voices rose and fell with a mix of alarm and excitement. Isabella recognized almost every face. Signora del Pane whispering into the ear of the butcher's wife. Old Signor Rinaldi stroking his beard thoughtfully. Young boys craning their necks to see over the adults. Teresina grunted. Look at them, like hens clucking over a spilled grain sack. Isabella forced a breath. Let's get closer. As they approached, the crowd parted slightly, but not out of respect, out of curiosity. Their eyes locked on Isabella with a mix of pity and hunger for scandal. An older man lifted the paper in his hands. Here she is, he announced as though presenting a spectacle. Let her hear it. Teresina stepped protectively in front of Isabella. You will lower your tone, Rinaldi. She is not an announcement. He huffed, but lowered the paper. Isabella stepped forward. Read it, she said quietly. The man cleared his throat. It says, and these are not my words. He lifted the paper again. It says, the abandoned wife seeks truth, but truth hides in the shadow behind her. Her husband fled, but not because of betrayal. He fled because he feared what she would soon discover. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Isabella blinked. What I would discover, Rinaldi continued. The wife believes herself wronged, but she does not know the whole story. She must look not at the man who fled, but at the man who stepped forward. Every head turned toward one direction, only one: Lorenzo. Though he had tried to remain distant, the crowd had already noticed him lingering near the edge of the square. His expression hardened as dozens of eyes fell on him. He did not retreat, did not flinch, but his jaw tightened. Rinaldi finished reading. "For the truth about Marco lies in the shadow of the Count." The silence swallowed the square. Isabella's breath turned to ice. Whispers erupted at once. "In the shadow of the Count? What does that mean? Did Marco owe him something? Was the Count involved? Is he the reason Marco fled?" Lorenzo stepped forward at once, voice firm. "Enough. This message is meant to mislead you." The butcher crossed his arms. "Is it? Because the words seem quite clear." Lorenzo glared, clear in intent, not in truth. But Signora Del Pan's voice rose above the noise, sharp and triumphant. "If the writer warns Isabella to look at the Count, then perhaps the Count is hiding something." Isabella whipped around. "Stop it, all of you." But the villagers pressed on. What secret lies with the Count? Why defend her so loudly? Why protect her with such passion? Is he connected to Marco's dealings? Did he know something? Lorenzo stepped closer, voice steady and sharp. "No, I had no involvement with Marco's business, and any suggestion otherwise is an invention." But the whispers would not stop. They grew louder, bolder, fueled by the old thrill of scandal. Isabella felt her throat constrict. "Lorenzo," she whispered. He turned to her, calm on the surface, but she could see the contained fury beneath. "This letter is crafted to turn the village against you," he said, "and to cast suspicion on me." "But why?" she asked. "Why connect us to Marco's disappearance?" Teresina muttered. "Because someone fears what the two of you might uncover." Lorenzo nodded. "Exactly." Isabella looked between the letter, the crowd, and Lorenzo's tense expression. "Then someone in this village knows the truth." A few villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Signora Del Pane crossed her arms. "Or someone wants to point suspicion away from themselves. This sort of mischief always has a purpose." Isabella took the letter from Rinaldi's hand. Her fingers trembled. She read the words again, then again. Each time they struck her differently. "What shadow?" she whispered. "What truth lies with you, Lorenzo?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something flicker in his gaze, something painful, something reluctant, something he had been holding back. But before he could answer, a shout came from behind the crowd. "Another message! Another one!" A boy ran toward the well, holding a scrap of paper above his head like a prize. Lorenzo's eyes darkened. "Enough games!" The boy reached Isabella breathlessly. "It fell from the well rope when they pulled up the bucket again." Isabella took the second note from his hand. Her stomach tightened as she unfolded it. It contained only one sentence. "You must ask the Count why Marco came to him the night before he fled." The world around her blurred. She looked up at Lorenzo, her voice breaking. "Marco came to you?" Isabella waited for Lorenzo's answer with her heart pounding, but he did not speak in the square. Not in front of the villagers, not under the weight of so many listening ears. Instead, he stepped toward her slowly, carefully, as though approaching something fragile. "Not here," he said quietly. "Please." The villagers murmured restlessly. Some leaned closer, eager for spectacle. Others whispered accusations. But Lorenzo kept his gaze only on Isabella, inviting her to decide. Her breath trembled, but she managed a small nod. Teresina placed a firm hand on Isabella's shoulder. "Come, child. Let him speak where eyes cannot twist his words." They walked away from the crowd, Lorenzo close behind, protective without imposing. Once they reached the quiet path behind the church, far from gossiping ears, Isabella finally turned to him. "Tell me," she whispered. Lorenzo drew a long breath, steadying himself. "Your husband did come to me the night before he fled." Isabella's throat tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I did not know how," he admitted, "and because I feared your reaction, while everything around you was already breaking." She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly. "What did he want, Lorenzo?" He looked away briefly, gathering the courage to speak the truth. "Marco came to me in desperation. He told me he had become entangled with men who promised him easy profit. He thought he could repay debts with quick gains, but when he realized he had been deceived, it was too late. Isabella listened in silence, but her hands trembled. He said they were pressuring him, demanding he complete the scheme. He feared they would expose him if he refused, and he feared that you would suffer for his mistake. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes filling with tears, not because she defended Marco, but because the shock of his secret life left her shaken to the core. She had lived beside him for years, never imagining the turmoil he carried alone. Lorenzo continued gently. He came to ask for help, my help. He wanted money to pay off part of his debt, hoping it would buy him time to find a way out. Isabella stared. You gave him money? No, he said quietly. I offered something else. She blinked, confused. What? Honesty, he replied. I told him that paying those men would not save him. It would only bind him to them further. I warned him that the only way out was to confess to the authorities in Florence, to expose the scheme before they could. Isabella shook her head slowly. He would never have the courage. He did not, Lorenzo said, and he told me so. He said he did not fear punishment for himself. He feared what would happen to you if the scandal reached the village. Her breath caught. So he chose to run. Yes, Lorenzo answered softly. He believed leaving you behind was a mercy, a cruelty disguised as protection. Isabella turned away, tears slipping quietly down her cheek. I had no idea he carried such fear. Lorenzo stepped closer, but did not touch her. Marco loved you, Isabella, but he loved you in silence, and in silence he drowned. The burden he carried was one he should have shared with you, but he was too ashamed. She wiped her tears with a slow, unsteady movement. Why did he go to you? There were others he could have asked. Lorenzo hesitated, then spoke the truth. Because he knew I admired you. Her breath faltered. He knew? Yes, he said. Not in detail, but he sensed it the way men often do, through instinct, more than words. She stared at him, stunned. He feared, Lorenzo continued, that if he confessed to anyone else the news might spread, and he believed that I, because of my feeling for you, would not condemn him in front of the village. Isabella pressed a hand against her heart. He came to you, because he trusted your regard for me? Yes, Lorenzo said. And because he thought you deserved someone stronger to protect you from the consequences of his mistakes. A single tear escaped down her cheek. He left believing he was doing what was best. Sometimes, Lorenzo said gently, people destroy themselves trying to protect others. Silence filled the space between them, quiet, heavy, and tender. After a long moment, Isabella spoke again. Did he ask you to look after me? Lorenzo shook his head. No, he never asked, but he hoped. I saw it in his eyes. He thought if he vanished, you would be safe, and he believed that if you ever needed help, I would not turn away. Her lips trembled. Did you try to stop him from leaving? I tried, Lorenzo said softly. I told him that running would not save you, that disappearing would hurt you more than any scandal ever could. But he was terrified, Isabella. Terrified of what he had done. He thought his absence was better than his failure. She stepped back and sank onto a low stone ledge by the path. Her voice was barely a whisper. I never realized how deeply he feared disappointing me. Because he hid it, Lorenzo replied. He hid everything. Isabella looked up at him, her eyes raw and shining. So now I go to him with truth I was denied. Yes, he said, but you go with strength that wasn't yours before. You walk into that monastery not as a woman abandoned, but as a woman who has survived the truth step by step. She nodded, breathing deeply until her heartbeat steadied. Lorenzo, tell me honestly, did Marco have reason to fear you? No, he answered immediately. I gave him nothing but truth, and truth frightened him. But I never threatened him, never coerced him, never judged him. She believed him at once, because Lorenzo had never spoken a word to her that carried anything but sincerity. She rose slowly. I must face him tomorrow, I know. And you will not come, she added quietly. No, Lorenzo said. This moment belongs to you alone. He must speak his truth without fear of me standing over his shoulder. She nodded again, grateful for his understanding. Thank you, Lorenzo. He exhaled softly, looking at her with a tenderness that warmed the cool air. When you return from that monastery, you will not return as the same woman who walks there. You will return with clarity. Her voice softened. And what if that clarity brings sorrow? Then let it bring sorrow, he said, and when the sorrow fades, you will find freedom waiting behind it. Her eyes shone with quiet strength. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Lorenzo smiled faintly, though the smile did not reach his eyes. Whatever it brings, you will face it without fear. The tension in her chest eased. She realized suddenly that she was not afraid, not of Marco's truth, not of the village's whispers, not of whatever awaited her at dawn. She breathed out, long and steady. Lorenzo stepped back. I will walk you home. They moved through the village in silence, each step settling something deep within her. The whispers had grown quieter as people retreated into their homes. Evening light softened every stone and shadow. At her door, she turned to Lorenzo with grateful eyes. Thank you, she whispered. For what? He asked gently. For standing beside me, she said, even when the village turned its back. He bowed his head slightly, his voice quiet. I would stand with you even if the whole world turned. Her heart fluttered, fragile and warm. He did not reach for her. He did not speak further. He only stepped away, giving her the space she needed. Isabella entered her home with a strange sense of calm. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled her. Tomorrow, she would walk to the monastery. Tomorrow, she would face the truth. And for the first time since Marco disappeared, she felt certain, steady and whole. Whatever happened next, she would not crumble. She had already lived her downfall, and now, slowly, quietly, powerfully, she was rising. Isabella barely slept. Dawn had not yet touched the sky when she stepped outside, shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The village was silent, its windows dark, its streets empty. For the first time in weeks, she felt no eyes following her, no whispers brushing her heels. Only the sound of her own steps and the steady beat of her heart. She walked toward the road leading to the monastery, her breath turning white in the morning cold. The path stretched before her, narrow and winding, bordered by olive trees and quiet fields. The air carried no threat, only expectation. She did not know what waited at the monastery gates. She did not know what Marco would say, or what words would come from her own mouth. But she knew she would not break. She had fallen far and risen higher. Halfway up the hill, she heard someone behind her. Lorenzo. She did not turn. She had known he would follow, even after saying he would not accompany her inside. His steps were steady but slow, respectful. He remained far enough to give her space, yet near enough to assure her she was not walking alone. When she reached the monastery walls, she finally turned. He stopped several paces away. Their eyes held for a long, quiet moment. Thank you, she whispered. He inclined his head. I will wait here, no matter how long it takes. Her chest tightened with emotion. She wanted to reach out to touch his hand, to hold his certainty close, but she only nodded and turned toward the gates. She stepped inside. A young monk greeted her with a gentle bow and guided her through a stone corridor to a small courtyard where a single bench stood beneath a fig tree. The air was cool and still. Wait here, the monk said. She sat, her hands clasped tightly. Moments later, footsteps approached behind her, hesitant, uneven. She turned slowly. Marco stood there. He looked thinner, older, worn by sleepless nights and the weight of his own guilt. His clothes were simple, borrowed from the monastery. His eyes, once kind, once familiar, were shadowed by shame. Isabella, he whispered. Her breath caught. She rose, unsure of what to say or feel. Marco, he lowered his gaze. You should not have come. I did not wish for you to see me like this. I came because you asked for me, Isabella said softly. And because I deserve answers. He nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, you do. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was not hostile. It was full of years, of memories, of truths they had never shared. Marco finally lifted his head. I failed you. Isabella stood still, her voice steady. Then tell me why. He stepped closer, but not too close. I met men who promised easy gain. I thought I could repay debts quickly and give you a better life. But I was foolish. They tricked me. They used me. And when I realized what I had done, I panicked. Why did you hide it from me? She asked. Because I could not bear for you to see the mess I had made, he said. You always saw the best in me, and I could no longer see anything good in myself. She shook her head gently. Marco, I would have helped you. I would have stood beside you. I know. he whispered. That is why I ran, because I did not deserve your help. She took a steadying breath. You left without a word. You left me to face humiliation alone. I know, he said again, his voice breaking. And I regret that more than anything. But I believed that staying would cause you even greater pain. It caused me pain anyway, she said quietly. Marco's shoulders sagged. I do not ask for forgiveness. I do not expect it. But I wanted you to know. I never stopped caring for you. My mistake was never you. Isabella felt a heaviness in her chest. Grief, not for the man he was now, but for the man he had once been, for the quiet moments they shared before fear swallowed him whole. He looked at her with humble courage. You have a future, Isabella. A future brighter than anything I gave you, and you must take it. Do not let my failure keep you from the life you deserve. She breathed deeply. And what will you do now? I will leave Florence, he said. Far away from the men who wish to use me again. Far away from the shame I brought upon myself. And you will go alone? Yes, he said. It is better that way. Isabella looked at him for a long time. I wish you peace, Marco. Tears filled his eyes, tears he had held back too long. And I wish you joy. She nodded once, and he bowed his head as though receiving a blessing. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing through a shadowed archway. His footsteps faded slowly, gently, until all that remained was silence. Isabella sank onto the bench, breath unsteady. Not because she was lost, but because the final tie to her old life had just dissolved. She felt no anger, no bitterness, only quiet acceptance. She had come seeking truth, and truth had set her free. She sat for several minutes, letting her heart settle, letting her thoughts breathe. Then she rose, took one last look at the still courtyard, and walked toward the gate. When she stepped outside, Lorenzo straightened immediately. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Isabella felt something open inside her, like a door she had been afraid to touch. Well, he asked softly. It is finished, she whispered. He studied her face. And your heart? She stepped toward him. It was the smallest step, yet it felt like crossing a vast distance. My heart is no longer bound to sorrow. Relief flickered across his eyes. Relief and something deeper, something warm and steady. What did he say? Lorenzo asked gently. That he cared, she replied, but not enough to carry the weight, not enough to stay. And you? He asked. I cared, she said honestly, but I do not love the man he has become, and I no longer fear what losing him means. Lorenzo nodded slowly, respectfully. He did not rush her, he did not press, but his eyes held hope. Quiet, patient hope. Isabella, he said softly, there is something you should know. Something I have held back for too long. She lifted her gaze to his. Tell me. Lorenzo took a breath, not of hesitation but of resolve. Before Marco approached me that night, I had already admired you, not from distance alone. I had seen your strength, your gentleness, your dignity in every step. And when you suffered, I felt the ache as though it were mine. Her breath trembled. Lorenzo, I did not speak before because you were not mine to speak to, he continued. And when Marco disappeared, I feared offering my heart would be mistaken for taking advantage of your grief. So I waited. And now, she whispered. Now, he said, I speak, because your grief is no longer a burden. It is a story completed, a chapter closed. And I love you not because you are wounded, but because you have risen. Her heartbeat skipped. His voice softened. Isabella, I love you with a steadiness I have never known. Not as a rescue, not as a command, but as a man who sees you fully. Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of something bright, something new. She stepped closer. And I have tried to silence what I feel, but each time you stood beside me, each time you spoke truth without fear, something inside me changed. Lorenzo's breath caught. I began to trust my heart again, she said, and it led me to you. A quiet, emotional stillness fell between them. Lorenzo reached for her hand, not claiming it, not taking it, simply offering. She placed her hand in his. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like two paths finally meeting after miles of wandering. Isabella, he said gently, may I ask you something? Yes. Will you allow me to walk beside you for every step from this day forward? Will you allow me to build a life with you? one free of fear and full of truth. Her heart swelled with warmth, with certainty, with joy stronger than she had believed she could feel again. "Yes," she whispered. Lorenzo's eyes softened with emotion so real it took her breath. He pulled her gently into an embrace, not possessive, not urgent, but deep and sincere. She rested her head against him, feeling the quiet strength of his heartbeat, the peace of knowing she was finally where she belonged. He pulled back slightly, lifting her chin just enough to meet her gaze. "Isabella Moretti," he said with quiet reverence. "Will you marry me?" Her smile bloomed like light. "Yes, Lorenzo, yes." His breath broke with relief and joy, and in that moment, he kissed her, softly at first, as though asking permission with the gentlest touch. Then she kissed him back with gratitude, with hope, with love reborn. When they parted, their foreheads rested together, their breaths mingling in the cool air. "We will face the village together," Lorenzo murmured. "But this time, you will not walk alone." "I know," she whispered, "because I have found my future." Their hands remained joined as they walked back toward the village, step by step, side by side. The sun finally rose over the hills, touching them both with warm gold, as if blessing the path ahead. For the first time in her life, Isabella walked not as the abandoned wife, not as the whispered name in the square, but as a woman reborn, free, cherished, and deeply, undeniably loved. And Lorenzo walked with her, not as a savior, not as a scandal, but as the man she had chosen. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.